Property Patriot, you are cleared hot.
Good day, high flyers, and welcome to the Aim High podcast. Today I am here with Cale Delaney. How are you, Cale?
I'm doing well, bud. Thank you for having me.
Cale, you're the fit investor. I know that. You know that. But why don't you give me a quick introduction and let everybody else know exactly who you are.
Yeah, sure. So just fit investor, that's a podcast and a community that we just started. And we talk about how to be fit financially, physically, and faithfully. So wanted to bring together something that not just talking about the business and the real estate all the time, but some other important parts of life. So we just started that group and that podcast, and so far it's had a good reception. A little bit about myself. I came about real estate relatively recently and taken it seriously, at least. Went to school for engineering, decided I didn't want to do that. Actually, right after I graduated college, I sold commercial real estate for a couple of years down in Miami. Just terrible timing, 2006 to 2008. So couldn't have picked a worse time. And so I got out of that and went into construction management for about 15 years and left real estate, investing, everything on hold. I was just living my life like we're taught to do, follow the social norms, invest in your 401k, IRA, all that bit. And it really wasn't until around 2020 that I had a bit of a mental revelation, let's call it that. And, I have 3 kids, but it was the birth of our youngest one, who's 3 years old now. And when he was born, I just had the challenge in my head of, I can't see myself living the same life for the next 30, 40 years. I can't do this. I got to find something. I got to find a way. And so I started digging in, trying to figure out how I was going to build wealth for myself and my family and not for somebody else anymore. And I fell back on real estate. That was the one thing I knew, that a lot of people get wealthy doing real estate, and I dove all in. And I started off with small multifamily. That was going to be my thing. Quickly saw it wasn't going to get me to where I wanted when I wanted. And thankfully stumbled upon short-term rentals shortly thereafter. And since then, over a course of 2 years, built a 7-figure business and $6 million portfolio. And now that's my full-time gig.
Great. That's a great transition. Usually you put service before self, but every once in a while you need to serve yourself and your family too, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's like when they tell you on the airplane, if you have people with you, make sure you put your mask on first, your oxygen mask on first.
Exactly.
So what exactly got you into real estate? I know that having the birth of the child really sparked something, but was there some kind of indicator, like other than, hey, I know people make money here, or what? Was there something else?
No, not really. I think it was just, I just didn't know what else to look into, really. Like I said, I had that little bit of real estate experience from way back selling the commercial real estate. And I had seen at the time, I was working with investors and they were wealthy. They didn't have your typical 9-to-5 jobs. And I just thought back on that and said, hey, that looks like something that I could do.
Yeah. And there's always that thing that hits you. But let's talk about your first deal, how you got into it. What brought you in?
Yeah. So once I made that decision that real estate was what I was going to do, I was all in. I was still working the W-2, which is a pretty demanding job. Is typically 10+ hour days. Like I said, I'm married. I have 3 kids, and I just started diving into podcasts, books, just doing as much research and diving in as much as I could. And I just started following some of the steps that people who are successful say to do. They say success leaves clues. Let's not reinvent the wheel. So one of the things or strategies out there was, how to get your first property in 90 days. And it involved basically underwriting a deal every single day and then sending out offers. And I followed that to the T. I picked a market locally, and I was literally pushing our baby in a stroller, walking every single street of that market that I had chosen. On Zillow every single day, started underwriting, started sending out offers, and lo and behold, within that first 90 days, I got my first offer accepted, and we're off to the races. And like I said, my initial thought was it was going to be small multifamily and long-term rentals. That was like a more familiar type of real estate, and it didn't seem too intimidating. And I didn't really even know much about short-term rentals at that time either. So it didn't even cross my mind, frankly. It was long-term rentals. What kind of long-term rentals, right? And so small multifamilies. It was actually a fourplex. That was the first deal that we bought, close to a beach. We lived locally down in South Florida. And it was basically 2 duplexes on the same lot. And we purchased that, and it's a good deal. We still have it, and it's a great deal at this point. But I just quickly saw that long-term rentals were not going to make a whole lot of money. And like I mentioned before, it was not going to get me to that financial goal that I had set and the time frame that I had set. And then I just kind of had a little bit of shiny object syndrome for a bit. I was looking at all these different asset classes in real estate after that, because I was like, I got to find something different. Like, this small multifamily deal is not going to work. And it was about 6 months or so after that before I came across short-term rentals, looking at all these other different things. But like I said, we still have that deal. We actually converted one of those units into a short-term rental afterwards, and now the property crushes it.
Outstanding. So that's what got you into that transition into short-term rentals? I'm not going to lie to you, man. I scoured your Airbnb stuff, and you're like a multi-reviewed, 5-star rated, verified host, and awesome. So you're doing something right.
Yeah.
Let's break down the short-term rental. What is your system?
Oh boy. I think the first step is, if you're going to be serious about short-term rentals and making it a business, you got to treat it like a business. I think that's one of the big things out there is a lot of people get into it and they treat it like a hobby. And it may be a hobby, that's fine. But if you really want it to become something, even if it is just a side hustle or a hobby, you got to treat it like a business. And I mean, that's why I was working that W-2 still for, really, I just left it towards the end of last year. So it was about 2 years into starting my investing in real estate that I was still working that full-time W-2 job and doing this real estate on the side. But to me, I started it with the intent that it's going to be a business. Let's run it as a business. Let's be professional about it. I connected, got in the right communities, got my systems in place, learned all the different softwares, how to automate things, read the books, listen to the podcasts, and just tap into, like I said, the communities. Those are really critical. Online communities, even like Facebook groups. You can find so many groups within the areas that you invest that are short-term rental specific, that are amazing sounding boards and learning tools. So I highly encourage anybody who's getting into it to leverage those communities and really be active and a part of them. And you make awesome connections too. So that's really what I did. Again, just tap into those different resources and treat it like a business from the beginning. And there's obviously a learning curve and a learning process. I made a lot of mistakes, and there was a lot of stress and anxiety, especially that first year. But now things are a lot more streamlined, a lot more automated, and it's a really pretty well-oiled machine at this point.
Great. Now, with all the success and everything in the short-term rental industry, have you ever had a nightmare situation pop up?
Oh, yes. There's been a few. And I'll say one that was probably the worst for me, and it really wasn't even the guest. Oftentimes you hear the guest nightmare stories, and I do have some of those. But this was just a situation that came up, and very, very early on in my short-term rental career as well. So my first property that I bought, I guess I went all in. So my first one was a big one. It was a 6-bedroom cabin up in the Smoky Mountains. Not a cheap property, a bit of a risk to jump in and go in all that on your first one. And I think it was about maybe a month after getting started that this came up. So it sleeps 16 people. We had a guest or a group of guests, 16 max capacity, come in, and I get a message, I think it was around 8:00 or so at night. And mind you, I do my miracle morning stuff. So I go to bed early and I get up early. 8:00 is late for me. So I get this message from the guest saying, hey, the drains downstairs are backing up. And it's like, okay, let me call a plumber, get somebody out there. Plumber goes out there, says, oh, don't worry, it's just a clog. I fixed it. You're all good. Great. About an hour later, I said, let me check the phone one more time before I go to bed here and make sure everything's good. Lo and behold, there's another message. Hey, it's backing up again. I was like, oh man, now it's too late to get another plumber out there. I contacted that same plumber. He said, I guess it must be a septic issue. That's out of our wheelhouse. Find a septic company. So I had to tell this group of 16 guests, who were thankfully very gracious, to not use the toilets, not use the showers, and until next morning when I can try to figure something out. And I also had a big presentation for work that was going on the next morning. And so I didn't sleep very well at all. And very long story short, but couldn't get a septic company out there for several days, had to relocate those guests. Turned out that it wasn't a septic issue. The plumber that had gone there in the first place just didn't do their job. And it ended up costing me about $4,000 and a lot of stress. And I learned a big lesson. I found a company now that I use that's amazing, who does plumbing, septic work, et cetera. So I made a great connection. But it was a very stressful experience, very costly experience. And that's one that I will always remember.
Nice. And Cale, the one thing that I will say, and I have it actually behind me, I leave it as a joke, the Wi-Fi, the network is your net worth, right?
Yeah, 100%.
on this little Wi-Fi thing that my wife got me. So yeah, networking is key, man. It'll take care of 99% of everything that ails you.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
Awesome. Now, what do you currently have going on?
So, like I said, I left the W-2, retired, quote unquote, from the corporate world. So now I'm focusing on the real estate investing full time. So we are still increasing and growing our portfolio. So we're currently active in our acquisition phase right now. We're also building out some other things. So like I mentioned before, we started this podcast and that community that we're hoping to grow. And then we're also offering now short-term rental consulting and co-hosting services as well. So we're just trying to expand a little bit of the services we offer and try to help some other people benefit from the experiences and the knowledge that we have at this point. So we're just hoping to continue to grow in that arena. And then we're also looking at expanding into some commercial real estate assets as well. We love the short-term rentals. They're amazing. And they're awesome for getting you that cash flow. And once you get to the level where you want to be with the cash flow, then I think it's wise to start diversifying and looking into some other types of asset classes. So that's our long-term plan right now.
Yeah, great. And the tax benefits aren't anything to sneeze at either. Right?
Oh, yes. I'm glad you brought that up. Those are wonderful. Yes. Yeah. And that's one thing I tell everybody, if you are a W-2 earner or even 1099, whatever, and especially if you're a high income earner, short-term rentals are one of the best ways to reduce your taxable income. I'm not a CPA, so consult your CPA, but the basic method is you do what's called a cost segregation analysis, which breaks up the different components of the building and their depreciation schedules. And then the current laws allow you to take what's called the bonus depreciation, which starting in 2023 now, it allows you to take 80% of that value, and then it decreases by 20% for the next years till it's gone, unless the laws change, which I hope they do. But so, that alone can be used if you meet certain qualifications, and short-term rentals specifically have not a loophole, but a easier qualification method than, let's say, long-term rentals to be able to utilize that depreciation to offset your active income. It's an amazing thing. Even when I was working the W-2 and making the same, if not more, income from my real estate, I paid literally $0 in taxes over the past 2 years. And I expect that to continue. So yeah, it's an amazing benefit.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie to you. That's absolutely awesome. I might have to talk to you about the consulting on the short-term rentals too, because, the cash flow, we got a bunch of long-term rentals, but anyway, that's for a different time. So what is the one thing you learned as your wealth increased?
I think it's still something I'm probably trying to learn at this point is at some point you have to decide when enough is enough. And because it's easy, once you reach maybe that initial goal that you set, then you up that goal. And then maybe if you reach that, then you up it again. There's a healthiness in that as well, right? You want to keep setting goals and keep challenging yourself. But at the same time, I think you want to have a limit or an understanding or set a parameter. Once I make this much, then maybe I need to focus on other things. Maybe I need to focus more on giving back. Maybe I need to focus more on just different areas of life. So I think that's a stage I'm in currently at this point as I continue to grow things is learning, when is it enough and when do I need to start focusing more on other areas of life?
Yeah. But there comes a time, and I tell my students that don't quit your day job until you're at 20 to 30% higher than what you're currently making, because you never know what's going to happen. But there comes a time when, look at it however you want, spiritually, God, something is pushing you where you feel like you're swimming upstream when you're going back to that day job, knowing that you have this thing that you are very passionate about. Did you hit that?
Yes. Yeah. I think short-term rentals are a very powerful tool when it comes to cash flow. I was making a good income, a good salary for my W-2 job, 6-figure salary, but I was able to replace that. I think it was around 6 months or so, maybe 6 to 9 months after getting started, that I was able to replace that income with my real estate. And I moved fast. Let's just put it, I scaled really quickly. I bought 7 cabins in the Smoky Mountains within a period of 18 months, as well as some long-term rentals as well. So I went pretty quick, so I replaced that income relatively quickly, but I stayed on with that W-2 for, like I said, it was about 2 years from when I got started, a year and a half after I actually had replaced the income. And there were some other reasons as well. We had some really big medical issues with my wife during that first year. So the insurance and keeping that in play was a big consideration, keeping the W-2 for a while as well. But even after that got cleared up, I still stuck with it for a little bit. And again, that was another way that helped me scale as quickly as I did, because I was able to bank 100% of the profits from the properties and just use that to reinvest and buy more properties. So yeah, same thing. If you have a job that, let's just say, that you can at least tolerate, you don't have to love it, but if you can at least tolerate for a period, by all means, stick with it. Bank that money from your real estate and reinvest it, because after you get those first 2-3 properties, if you do things right, that snowball effect takes place. And that's where those properties start buying your next properties. And it just goes and goes and grows and grows. Yeah, I 100% recommend that as well.
Great. Lessons learned, man. You're spitting out some knowledge here. So let's go into the soaring 4. These are the same 4 questions that I ask every guest that could help someone who's just starting out achieve new heights.
Yes, sir.
So what do you use to keep you motivated?
I mentioned the communities before. To me, I think that's one of the big things. Just, again, whether it's through online communities or if you have local groups that you can meet with in person or masterminds or whatever, but surrounding yourself with people of the same mindset, the entrepreneurial business mindset, whether or not it's real estate, whatever. But surrounding yourself with those people is going to be huge and critical, because, and I'll just say, one of the things that I expected it, but not as much. When I left the W-2 world, one of the things is it can be a bit lonely once you do that, right? Because you're leaving behind a network or a connection that you had for many years, possibly. Like I said, I worked in that job for the same company for about 15 years. And so you leave that behind, and a lot of your friends probably don't have the same mindset that you have now. And it becomes a lot harder to relate to people when you have that bit of a mindset shift. So finding people or a community that you can connect with that are like-minded in that way and that can encourage you is going to be crucial, because, like I said, it can get a bit lonely at first, and you need some encouragement to keep going, because it's not easy being an entrepreneur, especially a newer one. And you're going to need that support system to keep your pace and keep your growth.
Yeah. What is one thing that you learned that completely changed your mindset?
I think it really is just about changing to that entrepreneurial mindset. I never thought I would be an entrepreneur or a business owner. I was the kind of person that really flocked to safety and security. So having a W-2 job with the benefits and the 401k and all that seemed like a good idea. It seemed safe, which it's not as safe as you think, but it seemed safe and it seemed like the right and the smart thing to do. And I never thought of myself as going out on my own or anything like that. And one of the triggers also was reading the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book, which is a very common thing. And I had read it previously in life and it never had any effect. And so I think you got to read it at the right time. And so I was ready at that point. I read it again and it was like getting hit in the face with a brick. It was all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, now I understand. All this time I've been working and building wealth for somebody else when I could be doing this for myself and my family. And here's how I can do it through a business and through investing. And so that I think was really the revelation point of it's not as tricky or complicated as you may think. Really, it's just a matter of changing from this quadrant, from Rich Dad Talk, to this quadrant. And there's many ways to do it. And so once I had that just mental revelation and I went all in, I started to see all these clues from my past that said, hey, you do have a skill set to be an entrepreneur. I was always a person to have a side hustle. I flipped cars, I flipped motorcycles, all these various things throughout my life. I was always looking for ways to make some extra money. And so now looking back, I'm like, okay, I guess maybe it's not as illogical as it seemed at the time. But when I was in that W-2 world and that mindset, like I said, I never envisioned myself doing something like this. So now I see it. Now I've gone through it, and I'm glad I did.
Cool. What tools do you use to keep yourself on track?
Yeah. So in the short-term rental industry, tools and software and automation is your best friend. So there's a lot of various tools and softwares that I use for the business specifically. There's things called your PMS or property management software, dynamic pricing software, automatic messaging. Even AI now is making a big entry into the short-term rental space, as well as many other industries. So there's a tremendous amount of these types of tools that I use from the business perspective. From a personal standpoint, thankfully, I'm a relatively, frankly, very disciplined person to begin with. Once I made that jump and left the W-2 world and you leave that structure behind, you have to build your own routine and your own structure. So still a work in progress, but I keep my morning routine is very strict. I have a very long morning routine of exercise and Bible study and all these other things that I do to get myself set up for the day. And then just using calendars, blocking out your time in your calendars and setting those appointments. That certainly helps.
Yeah. Now you're talking about your morning routine and you already said Miracle Morning. So I got to ask you, Hal Elrod, which one is your favorite?
Which of the parts of the Miracle?
Yeah. Which one did you subscribe to that got you into your morning routine?
For me, the biggest part, or the most, well, I shouldn't say the most important part, but the part that at least gets me moving and most prepared for the day is the exercise part.
Yeah.
So I'm into the gym, weightlifting. That's been my thing for a long time. That's a big part of my morning routine, is going to the gym early and taking that time for that workout. And that's what helps me relieve a lot of stress and decompress and just focus on what I'm doing at the gym and not any of this other stuff. And I make it a point that I don't, besides looking at my Bible app, I don't check my phone until I'm done with my morning routine, which is about a 3-hour long process. So I make it that's one rule that I made for myself to help alleviate a lot. Honestly, it started from alleviating anxiety, because with the short-term rentals, especially in the beginning, when you're not sure how to handle a lot of situations, I would almost dread each morning when I got up and I'd see the messages on the phone and be like, oh my gosh, I hope it's not an angry guest. I hope it's not an angry guest. I have a lot of anxiety. And so I just set that rule that, you know what, I'm not even going to look until I get through my process. And then if there's a situation, I'll be in a better mindset to take care of it.
Perfect. Now, what is one thing that you would change if you had to start all over?
I was looking at this question. I was trying to think of something really good. Besides, I'm not going to go with kind of the cliche or common answer of, I wish I had gotten started sooner. I mean, that's certainly one of them. But I think the main thing I would have done is start building a team. Maybe not from the very beginning, but early on, because I'm still working on that and in that process now. But the more people I talk to, everybody, literally every single person says, I wish I had started building that team sooner. And I'm so glad I did. And it's allowed me to grow exponentially since I did. Yeah. I think that's probably the main thing that I would have, or wish I would have started earlier on in the process.
Awesome. All right. Cale, I really do appreciate your time. I know you are jumping through hoops with everything that you got going on. So thank you very much for coming on today.
No problem. I appreciate it, man. This is great.
Yeah. Hey, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, how would they do that?
Yeah. So just Facebook or Instagram, you can find me, Cale Delaney. Like I said, I'm pretty active on Facebook, especially in a lot of these real estate and investing communities. We also have, like I said, our podcast, The Fit Investor, and we have a Facebook group called The Fit Investor, which I would be happy for you to join and check out as well.
All of Cale's contact information is down in the show notes. For those of you watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast platform, until the next time we meet, aim high.